All right, so on the right side of the whiteboard is the stuff we're going over today, and then on the bottom, where it says seat and cervical, we'll be doing that as well. And then next week, there won't be, I think there's only really one new thing, so there'll still be some room to kind of write that down there in relationship to being able to follow through with what we're doing today. What I wanted to start off first with is a couple examples of some soft tissue stuff that you can practice, and then we'll start doing the manipulative stuff in relationship to the upper cervical spine, some of which is not really that different from what we learned last week, some of which is. We'll kind of go over that, and then depending on the timing that we have left over, I think we will have enough time to at least have a demonstration of the seated cervical and maybe a little bit of time to go over that. Remembering that for the lab practical, you're going to be responsible for the orthopedic tests. You're going to be responsible for palpatory landmarks. You're going to be responsible for stuff from before the midterm. I believe you're going to be responsible for deep tendon reflexes. I don't think in this class I'm going to hold you responsible for trigger points, but I will check that and let you know. Steve says that that's not the case, but I don't think you can get inside my head. So
you never know.
Yeah, well, it would be scary if you did. All right, so last time we talked about in relationship to the soft tissue work. Sometimes it's just helpful to kind of do a little bit of a jiggle thing, just to kind of see if the patient, number one, is their head jiggling, or if their feet are jiggling, so you know that there's not any, excuse me, like blocks physically or sometimes even energetically in the system. So, in terms of that choreography for evaluation of the cervical spine, is what I recommend, or what I do, and then I would certainly recommend that you guys develop your choreography so that when you evaluate a patient, you kind of do that choreography so you don't forget stuff. But in terms of being able to evaluate trigger points, as if you remember, there's the suboccipital trigger points, which can be in the suboccipital area, which we had pictures of in the class, and there's the posterior cervical, which are in the facet areas opposite C5 through C7, so that's a slightly more generalized location. There's the upper trapezius, which tends to be just kind of on the top of the shoulder where it kind of makes the turn. So that was the upper traps. There's the supraspinatus trigger point, which is in the muscle belly typically of the supraspinatus, and then the levator scapula, which is on the medial superior border of the scapula. So these are ways that you can, in some contexts, still static, evaluate: is there tension? Is there sensitivity? Is that sensitivity local, or does it radiate? If it radiates, then yes, it is a trigger point. If it doesn't, it's a tender point, even though for the most part the intervention for treatment would be the same. Then there's a couple other things that I would do in relationship to some cranial type holds, or traction holds. It would be what I would utilize in preparation prior to treatment of manipulation. So I'm going to demonstrate some of those now so you can kind of practice those up. These aren't really going to be necessarily, they're not going to be part of your test, but it's just important to have, I think, soft tissue interventions so that you can, relax the patient and so on and so forth. So in terms of being able to, in particular, treat, since we're dealing with primarily upper cervical, the suboccipital trigger points, one of the things that I recommend, and I'll do this on both sides so you can see. As you probably noticed, the contact quite often is, index finger in the suboccipital region for leverage, ER eminence kind of on the zygoma and or parietal area, particularly in this particular position. So if I'm going to do that, then this hand's going to kind of hold his head, right? So I have support. Then I'm going to roll him over. This other hand is going to reach in like this, so my whole palm kind of goes underneath, which allows me to put my thumb in the occipital ridge. And then I'm also, just practically speaking, you can see my forearm is perpendicular, so this gives me the most leverage, and my elbow area just resting on my leg, so it just provides support for me. Then I can make fingers, I can make circles with my thumb in the suboccipital region for those muscles along that occipital ridge, right, the suboccipital ridge. And I'm able to see if, in fact, there's any areas that feel tight, and I can certainly ask the patient if there's any measure of sensitivity. Is that sensitive in there, Chris? Is that locally sensitive, or does it radiate? Okay. So that's, would be considered kind of like a tender point. So this is just kind of coming in like that, just using my thumb. If you get comfortable to some degree with this, what I end up doing is kind of, circling, using this hand to kind of make his head rotate a little bit, using this thumb to make his head rotate over here. So I'm kind of doing more of a specific, rotatory, kind of reaction. I'm not necessarily using a lot of pressure with my thumb this way. If I want to get more pressure, I just roll his head over on top of my thumb. Then the weight of his thumb, the weight of his head provides, more pressure necessarily than me doing, a more significant kind of pressure. What that looks like on this side is this hand just going to kind of hold here. Again, index finger in the suboccipital ridge, inner eminence on the zygoma. Kind of rotate his head to some degree. This other hand comes in, so it's like this. So my fingers are just kind of going to the other side. And then my thumb, again, is in that suboccipital region. I'm fairly perpendicular to the suboccipital region to the neck because it gives me the most leverage. I'm just resting my arm on my leg so that way I'm not up here kind of like all stressed out. And then I'm just using kind of circles to go through the suboccipital area, the suboccipital line, the nuchal line there. And then if I want to get more pressure, I can just use this hand to kind of like rotate his head over. And then there can be the aspect of using kind of rotation with both this hand and this thumb. Again, I'm not going to test you on this. You can just experiment with this to get that sense of, because these are primarily focused on the upper cervical region. They're going to allow relaxation, so when you go to manipulate it, it's just going to be relaxed. And it makes it easier to manipulate. So the other things that are on there in terms of the traction holds, there's a bowstring traction, and I believe there are pictures of this in the PowerPoint. This is just where I'm using my hands like this. My fingers kind of come up, and I'm just going to use bowstring traction on those extensor muscle groups. So, the bowstring, kind of you pull a bone in an arrow, so it's like that. Now, obviously, this is pretty subtle. Just kind of push up to where you kind of feel the SPs, and then, you kind of in on that extensor muscle group, and then I'm just going to kind of pull lateral. And I would hold that for however long I feel is necessary. Today I'm not going to hold it very long because it's just a demonstration, but 20, 30 seconds, 45 seconds a minute, maybe something like that just helps to relax it. And then when I let go, I don't just kind of like twang, let go all the, kind of a slow release. Then I would drop down to the next level, repeat the same kind of process, and just kind of pull and hold that for a period of time. Sometimes this gives me information about if the muscles really feel tight or something like that. I can get some sense of that. So that's what bowstring traction looks like. Bridging traction, I put my hands like this, and my pinkies aren't really involved because they're too short. But my index, middle, and ring finger of each hand kind of make a little bridge, and that's where the posterior arch of C1 will rest, or the muscle area between the occiput and the posterior arch of C1. So, and then his head are just going to rest, like his occipital region, on my thenar, hypothenar eminences. So it's just kind of back like this, and so just rest there. I'm not really pushing up. You used to ask the patient to relax and watch their breathing, make sure that they're breathing. Chris is breathing, so that's a good thing. Sometimes when you work with patients, just notice, no, you're not breathing. Because they're kind of holding their breath a little bit, because they're not really sure what's going to happen. So you just remind them, take a nice deep breath, blah, blah, blah. So, and again, you can just do this for, whatever seems to be appropriate time frame. Quite often, one of the things that you will feel is the head will get heavier in your hand. Because the patient begins to relax, it kind of just drops down a little bit. So you kind of, you can wait to see if you can feel that. And then the last hold, which is called the suboccipital traction, this is where my hand is kind of in a V. And then the thenar eminences in particular are going to be contacting the suboccipital ridge. So usually I put one hand in like this. It doesn't really matter which side you start on. The other hand kind of comes in, just fits like this. And then my thumbs are kind of resting on the sternocleidomastoid area or on the articular pillar. And then I can just pull back a little bit. And you can see as I'm pulling back, Chris's toes and feet are kind of coming forward or coming up a little bit. So then I know that I have adequate traction, which will also make some sense next week when we learn how to do a traction release. And so I also am letting my forearms rest on my legs, so it's not really a lot of stress on my body. My whole body kind of leans back. And I can hold this for some period of time. And I usually do this, and then when I'm complete with that, then I would go into a manipulative correction. And by this time, those muscles are kind of relaxed. I've had an additional ability to kind of feel if, in fact, the person is somewhat more relaxed now. And I would do more assessment stuff before I would do this, but I'll show you that when I get ready to do the corrective stuff. I just wanted to show you this stuff first, so you can just partner up, just kind of run through this, so you get the aspect and that beginning of remembering how to do this, because this is important. Because it isn't just all about the structural, osseous manipulation. Whoopee! You got to do the soft tissue stuff as well, which helps to relax the patient, and that gives you a better opportunity to be successful. Okay, so let's have you do that first. Thank you, Chris.